Need to fair courts and even money, but it's going to
Yeah, right.
lawyers.
Thank you. Right.
There's a question back here.
I've always been reluctant to contact people in Topeka and even the Chamber of Commerce, knowing that if they see a Lawrence address, they'll cut it off. So I'd like one or both of you to give all of us a call to action. What can we do?
Yeah.
You need to contact everyone that you know throughout the state, and actually do a little homework and find out who's representing them and what they've done. So talk to your relatives, talk to your friends who live in other districts, and let them know. Certainly call us and say, what do you think about what this representative or this senator has done if you see them in committees? I mean, we need a conversation about how people have voted, how people have made arguments, what are they backing, because if we don't know that, we're not going to be informed when we go to vote. And if you're comfortable with your representatives, and I hope that you are, then talk to other people about what you think is in the way of us getting the kind of policies we want for the future of Kansas.
Yeah, and I actually think if you recall, because I know you all memorize bills like I do, but 2453 got a lot of play this year. This was the Religious Freedom Bill, i.e. discriminate against gay and lesbians and deny services. That blew up in the faces of those that thought it wasn't going to be a big deal. And I think that was a lot in part, a lot due to the fact that people were active through a number of means. People showed up at the Capitol. People were active on social media. People put pressure on the speaker. I mean, if you don't have the votes in the Capitol, we got to use the media to put some pressure on it. So I think that proved that something can be done. In addition, the fact that the RPS repeal got stopped in the House was in large part due to the fact that there was a lot of calling and showing up at the Capitol. So I think that's really important. The other thing is understanding who are at the levers of power. So it may be identifying who's chairing committees, and again, having one of us go talk to them. It's finding out who, it might be sending your money to people in other districts so that they can stay elected. And it might also mean if you traditionally vote for Democrats and support Democrats, in some cases all we might have are our moderate Republican friends. And the reason we've been able to do or stop things is because of the coalition of moderate Republicans and Democrats, who might add are moderate as well, but we never had that qualifier.
We changed the law about allowing people to change their registration. Now, this year, as I know, available through June 1st. It may be available for July 1st. It depends on when the act goes into effect. But it's going to be even more important to figure out ahead of time who is running and how you position yourself to make the best use of your vote. Do you need to pick one?
Yeah, I have 2 more minutes, but
Okay. I'll let you pick.
No, you pick.
Alan.
Was there anything about firearms this year?
Well, the issue about firearms talked about taking away local control over
Open carry.
well, open carry, not concealed carry, but open carry.
There was a concern that there's just this patchwork of laws that if I'm driving around with a gun in my truck, or my Honda Civic, I don't want to go through Wichita and feel like all of a sudden I'm going to be arrested because I'm breaking the law. So it's the push, and it passed the House, I think, it passed the Senate too, I think. It's on its way to the governor's desk that now has, prohibits municipalities from restricting open carry of a firearm. And I don't think it's loaded though. I don't think they allow loaded on they can have in your window.
It passed the Senate 38-2.
Yeah.
But it does. But that
I'm one of the 2.
and I'm one of the 19 that voted against it in the House. It does actually do one good thing, which it doesn't allow open carry on campuses, on college campuses, which is kind of a good thing. But we still can. After 3 years, we will have concealed carry on college campuses, most likely.
But eight Democrats in the Senate voted for it?
6. Okay, the gun lobbies are very strong,
I know.
and there's some people who early on thought that they would protect their NRA rating and
their
to be able to vote on some other things. I just show up and say, I have my marksman first class. And then that's all I say about guns.
Am I right that it's legal to carry a gun inside the state capitol?
Currently it is.
But legislators can carry.
So the general rule is
You get in an argument?
if a public building, a government building has adequate security, which is loosely defined, but basically security guards and metal detectors, you can prohibit concealed weapons and guns. If they don't, then you have to allow concealed carry. And the Capitol has adequate security.
Yeah.
Except for that the senators and representatives are never checked.
Right, exactly.
So you cannot do that in the state capitol?
A citizen cannot.
A citizen cannot.
What do you think, politics in Kansas is a form of insanity?
So it's interesting. I'll have to get the link to you all. I read a fascinating article about why you can't convince your conservative uncle of anything, and it looks at brain science and behavioral science, and it boils down to the fact that, at least from the article's perspective, that people are more willing to ignore facts and data than change their values and who they associate with, because it's harder to change your identity and your personality and lose social groups than it is to just ignore facts. I think that's what we're dealing with right now. Is people, it's if you're surrounded by it, if you have an echo chamber of where you get your news from, who's at your church, who's in your family, then you don't want to alienate them. They gave the example of if Sean Hannity tomorrow said climate change is real and it's the most pressing issue of our time, he would get kicked off the air. Fox News would alienate him. Conservative politicians would say he's crazy. And that's an example of that. I mean, right, I don't think that's unreasonable to think that would happen. So I don't know how we fix that, but I think it's an interesting explanation of it all.
Can you cite that article? I'd like to read it.
Yeah, where was it? It was from, there's a new actually media outlet called Vox, started by Ezra Klein of the Washington Post.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrific. VOX.
VOA.
I was just reading
FOX.
15 facts about healthcare spending this morning. It was brilliant. So,
Okay, thank you.
Vox.
Forrest.
Senator Mary Pilcher Cook, if I'm correct, is the chair of the Senate Committee on Health and Social Welfare. Looking at her bio, she has absolutely nothing in her background that suggests any expertise in the fields of public health or welfare.
There's a new HHS
However, in almost
secretary.
every article in the newspaper that's referring to the healthcare laws, et cetera, and welfare, she is quoted as the authority. Does the Senate or the legislature have any other authority in the field of public health and welfare?
The prior chair, I believe, was Senator Vicki Schmidt.
Right.
And her background is as a pharmacist.
And married to a doctor.
Right, married to a doctor. So that was a very different set of bills that came out of that committee. And to her credit, Senator Schmidt is very engaged still in reviewing and commenting on all of that, and has some sway because of people recognize that she has that expertise. We don't require, we have a citizen legislature, so we don't require that any of our chairs, if the vice chairs or chair of utilities has now become a member of the Kansas Corporation Commission, so our vice chair could be chair of utilities and doesn't necessarily have to have a background in utilities or understand anything about it. That's some of what you get with the citizen legislature. That's why we want as many good lobbyists there, and it's why we want as many good citizens feeding us information, because we are being asked to review a lot of stuff.
I have to go. I apologize, everybody, but I'm really glad we could.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
I think we're pretty much done with the front.
Who are the 2 or 3 really good lobbyists in the field of public health and social welfare? If you come up with
Lobbyists.
lobbyists.
Social welfare would be, who's the sister from Kansas City, Kansas, who always comes up and talks to us about the death penalty?
Oh, yeah,
I should know her name. I'm not on those committees, so,
right.
you know, I'm on agriculture, natural resources. So I can tell you who's really good on natural resources. The Nature Conservancy has been excellent this year in terms of providing some information. The Audubon group has been very good. And in fact, a little more about the prairie chicken. The legislature was reviewing the 5-state plan, and the chair of natural resources thought that there was a better plan out there. And this was a plan from the Farm Bureau. And one of the things for it was that it didn't have all this bureaucracy. So I asked during the hearing how they were going to implement their plan, and they said, well, we have bureaucracy, it's just not government bureaucracy. Because they recognized that it was mitigation banking, the same sort of thing. But the individual from the Nature Conservancy put me on to the website where the same group that the Farm Bureau was supporting had worked on the desert tortoise. And in fact, it's a mitigation banking business. And they said they could not even come up with their plan until November, hoping that that would be after the listing, because they can't make any money unless they're buying and selling this mitigation service. So I don't think private business is always cheaper, and in this case, somebody was definitely there to hope that they could make money off of the listing. That's not answering your question, but I will talk to Senator Schmidt and see if I can get back to you and say, you know, because there are definitely people. Mitzi McPatrick has been very good about what?
Paul Johnson.
Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson reports extremely well and is always there to give you a viewpoint. I think the information from somebody like Mitzi, or, you know, I mean, he's watched the legislature and he knows what's going on. He doesn't have the same kind of background in health.
Another name is Barbara Boyer. She's a
Oh.
representative. Now, she's from the Mission Hills, the Johnson County area. She's Republican, but she's a doctor.
She's an anesthesiologist, and my best friend.
The way I want her.
She's my best friend on women's health issues.
Yes.
And after Doris, Doris Furtado was a retired professor from KU Med. So she was the one I always went to, but when she retired, it's Barbara Boyer, Representative Boyer,
But
and
she's
she
very moderate
absolutely knows what she's talking about. And it was interesting because the legislature is trying to talk about fetal pain. Well, wouldn't you talk to someone who's made pain their profession? And so she actually has a very wide breadth of knowledge on a number of those issues, but
And I just received mailing from somebody who's running against her, so that I don't know, but I'll bet she's gonna have some.
I think that she is going to have some opposition, but she's a person we need to keep in there. Again, not just, this is an example of when you actually can get someone in the legislature with some expertise. That's fabulous because they're always at the meetings, even if it's 3 in the morning.
Marcy, could I just make an announcement?
Sure.
Bob Verharder, who was for years Secretary of SRS, and who I think made an extraordinary contribution to this state through his years of service. His memorial service is being conducted at this moment.
Right, it started at 1, because I would have gone if I hadn't committed to this.
Good man.
And he was someone who kept up years later and talked to us about SRS and those issues.
since it's estimated about 15% of the state is not paying income tax this year. The doctors or lawyers or so-called businesses, small businesses and corporations. Is there any way to find out how many legislatures that voted for this are not paying income tax this year? Or when even, if you can't name names, can you get a percent of the ones that voted for this bill?
I have, not all my income, and certainly not all my husband's because he works at the Kmart distribution center, but, we have rental property and this year we're not paying Kansas income tax on,
Or is it an estimate of the rest?
so I don't know, and it also would be, you couldn't just look to say if they paid income tax or not, because some individuals only have their legislative pay, and that would not be enough, once you get your deductions to necessarily pay that, and it's gonna be, you know, people could have a part-time business. Representative Davis is part of a law firm.
But the first 15,000 is taxed at 3%, and anything over 15,000 you earn is taxed at 4.9%. And yet
Okay.
all these doctors and lawyers and small business are not paying the same income.
Right,
And that's a 15% decrease in revenues coming in.
right.
I
And
think
legislative,
It's so unfair.
much of your, okay, those of us who live within 50 miles of the Capitol are taxed on our legislative pay. People who live more than 150 are not. And then between that, I think you're taxed on per diem and not pay. So you can, I don't know that you could look at a return for a legislator and know. Well, you could, because if you could look at their federal returns, but I don't know that we make our returns public. We do file statement of interest, so you have to say if you're in a business, and you would be able to look to see.
You have to say whether you're incorporated and fall under subchapter S.
Right.
Limited to partnership or these other definitions of small business. So would that be available on the internet? Look up on
Yes,
each
Secretary of
legislature?
State's, and the, you can find, a new statement of substantial interest needs to be filed by April 30th. So you could at least find out if your legislators are involved in a business that would not be taxed.
To the right.
I'm sorry.
I remember reading that, that several months ago, Grover Norquist came to Topeka and advised Republicans in the legislature not to do stuff related to immigration. And it seems to me like we haven't heard a lot about that issue lately. Am I wrong in that impression?
That would have been before the session
Right,
began
right.
at their caucus.
Uh-huh. I mean, they haven't gone after in-state tuition for undocumented students, right?
Not this year. So we haven't heard much about that. And there was an interest, certainly, I think, from the governor's point of view, in trying to be moderate. It's very hard for some of us in the legislature too. Okay? We're well over time, but I've so enjoyed this.